Hi everybody, it's Sophia. Welcome to my channel, my little cozy corner of the internet. Today I wanted to talk about all the books that I read this autumn, so my wrap up for September and October. It's a big one-ish, but there's a lot of audiobooks, as we'll see. So if we want to start with what I read in September, and just wanted to give a disclaimer, I am a little bit, so I looked at what I rated this month, and usually I'm pretty light with like how easily I rate books. I do have a Goodreads and a Storygraph. I'll probably put them in the description. Usually I'm pretty loose with like rating because I read for fun. I'm not a critic, so I don't rate quite heavily, but this month was not amazing, so my ratings are probably a little bit lower than they usually are. So just wanted to get that out of the way. So the first book that I read in September was The Invisible Girl by Lisa Jewell. So this is something a little bit different for me because I usually don't read like thriller. I actually have read a few Lisa Jewell books back in probably like COVID, but usually I don't read many thriller books. So this was new for me. I was honestly just really quite bored one day at my summer job, which went into September, and they had a little free library, so I saw this there and I thought it'll entertain me more than just staring into space. So I decided to start reading this, and it was actually really good. So it follows a girl, it follows like multiple families. I don't even, it was the beginning of September, I barely remember, but it follows a few families. A girl was really interesting to read because I'm just blanking on her name now, but she struggles with finding a place. She just lives with like her uncle. I don't think this is a spoiler, but she struggles with where she belongs. She doesn't really have much family except for her uncle. So she spends a lot of time like sleeping in like outside and like just walks a lot outside. So I thought that she was a really interesting character to read because I've just never read anything like that before. And I read it one day when I was at work, and then the next day I read it and I literally couldn't put it down. I actually thought it was really good. I ended up giving this 4 stars. Next, we have The Perks of Being a Wallflower. Okay, I know I'm a little late on this trend. I have never read this before. This was my first time reading it. I thrifted this book. I thrift a lot of my books, or like buy them secondhand, whatever you want to call it. So I got The Perks of Being a Wallflower quite a while ago, and I thought that I would pick it up this September, and it was really good. I really resonated and related with the main character, whose name is Charlie. Yes, Charlie. How he was like getting nervous in malls and stuff. I felt like that was something that I've never really read the way that I feel. Like he was getting overstimulated. He didn't use that word, but like there would just be too much happening in malls. And then also when he was like talking about how his friends weren't replied to him even though it was just like a couple of days, I thought that I really resonated with that as well, even though like it's not a big deal if your friends don't reply for a few days, but you know, you start to like get in your head about it. So Charlie, I really resonated with Charlie. I really liked this book. I just really liked it. It was really relatable, and I probably should have read it sooner, but again, this was a really great book, and I highly recommend it, especially to any like teenagers. I think I should have read it when I was a teenager, but what do you do? So I did end up giving this 5 stars because I really liked it and I really related to it. It was great. Then starts my intro to audiobooks. Now, I've never really listened to too many audiobooks, but I thought that I was wanting to read more books, but I didn't have time to read more books, or I just didn't want to read more books. So I thought that it would be good to read audiobooks. So the first one I started with was These Infinite Threads by tahereh. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. I'm really bad on pronunciations. That was the second book in the series This Woven Kingdom. I do have This Woven Kingdom physically, and I read it physically, like the physical book. But I thought I would listen to this in an audiobook. And going into it, I did see reviews that were saying that it was quite boring, like filler, and I agree, it was. I really struggled to get through the audiobook. I had it on like a really fast speed because I didn't really feel like anything was happening, and then even in the end, like I just felt like it could have been either a few hundred pages shorter, or it could have just been added to either the first book or the second book. I did enjoy the first book. I don't know if I will be reading any future books in this series. I think the first one was good, and I think that's enough for me personally. So I ended up giving that 3 stars. And by the way, all of the star ratings are out of 5. I feel like that's average. That's what Storygraph does, and that's what Goodreads does as well. So yeah, ratings are out of 5, not out of 10. So then the next book I read was also an audiobook, and this was Untethered Sky by Fonda Lee. This was a short book. I think the audiobook is only like 3 or 4 hours, so I've listened to it probably in just one sitting. When usually I listen to audiobooks like when I'm at my office job, because it's something that I can listen to when it's super quiet, but it is something entertaining rather than just sitting in silence, and I can do work at the same time. So Untethered Sky follows a girl, and it's in like a different world, sort of fantasy-ish, where they just basically have big birds and like train big birds. I don't know how else to describe it. So it basically follows her training a big bird. That's all I can say, really. Again, this didn't really leave a lasting impression on me. I thought that the big bird thing was cool, but I just felt like it was an idea, and I don't think it should have been longer unless there was like something else to have happened. The characters were interesting, but yeah, it was just kind of there. So if you're interested in that sort of like big bird thing, I do recommend it. And it was good as an audiobook, like it was entertaining, but I finished it and I thought, yeah, that was good, but it didn't really leave anything with me. So I ended up giving that a 3.5 stars. Next, yet another audiobook. This is a trend for these months. This was Warcross by Marie Lu. I am a big Marie Lu fan. I've read a lot of her books starting in the pandemic, really, and I really like a lot of her books. This one for me was good. It was pretty good. It's a YA sort of fantasy sci-fi-ish book. Sort of can relate it to like Ready Player One in a sense, where it's like a gaming world sort of thing. I thought this was good. Twist I did sort of see coming in a way, but it was entertaining. Like, I did like it. So that's good. Will I be reading the second book? Probably not, but I liked the characters. I thought the video game was fun in a way. Not the best that I've read. I do tend to read a lot of these like video gamey books, as you'll see. But yeah, it entertained me, so I ended up giving that not 5 stars. I gave it 4 stars. 4 out of 5 stars because yeah, it was entertaining and the audiobook was read really well. Sometimes if I can like tell that it's a person reading, it kind of like throws me off, but this was really good. Like, it was very seamless and smooth. So I really enjoyed that experience. So yeah, 4 stars for Warcross by Marie Lu. Next, for my last book of September and my second 5-star listen, was Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. So this as well is something that I don't usually read. It was written in 1979, so it's like set in the present time. It's a woman who's living in the present time, but it's 1979, if you know what I mean. It's not like 2024. So she lives in 1979, but then she is randomly transported back to like the antebellum South in like when they had slaves and stuff, and she's a Black woman living in 1979, so she goes back there and she helps this little boy named Rufus. Like, so when she goes back in her time in 1979, it'll be like a few seconds or a few minutes or just a few days depending on how long they're back in the South, but back there it'll be like months or years. So I believe that this book was actually the first sci-fi novel written by a Black woman, which was really interesting to read. It's Octavia E. Butler. She's very famous. It was really good. I really liked it. I would say it's quite graphic. So if you're sensitive to mistreating of people of color, which you should be, like I think everyone should be sensitive to that, or just, you know, cruelty to anyone, it's pretty rough in that case. It goes pretty deep into it, but I think it was a good read. And while it's not directly a nonfiction book. I think that it has a lot of like truth in the way that people were treated back then in the antebellum South. So it was really interesting. I really liked it. And especially with like when her boyfriend goes back with her as well as a white man, and then he gets to live a different experience and they sort of get to talk about it, where hers like versus his. I thought it was really interesting. So I do highly recommend this. The audiobook was read very well. Can't talk about how it is to physically read it, but I do really recommend this, and that was 5 stars as well for me. I think I already said that. So now let's go into what I read in October. So again, a lot of audiobooks this month. But the first one I read is actually a physical book, and this one is Firebreak by Nicole Kornher-stace. Again, sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong at all. So this, again, I thrifted this book. So this is something that I did have on my list for a while, that I wanted to read it. So that is, again, another video game-esque book where there's like a video game and then there's these certain characters, and the book follows the main character and her best friend when they try to figure out, what are these people? Are these real people? Are they like AI? Are they like trapped? What's going on? So, and they do figure out, and it's like a whole thing. And I did think that it had some pretty good messages, and it was a really interesting book to read. I really liked it. I like these video game books. It's so silly, but I do really like them. So the ending was really great. So yeah, I really enjoyed Firebreak. I gave it 5 stars as well. So first book of the month, and it was a 5-star read, so that's very good. Then we have an audiobook, which was The Fates Divide by Veronica Roth, and this was the second in the series of Carve the Mark. Again, I did read Carve the Mark physically, and then Fates Divide listened to on audiobook. It's like, so Veronica Roth is the author of Divergent. That's her most popular book, but then she does have other books like Carve the Mark's duology, which aren't very well known, and I've been getting into reading more of her books as I've like followed her on Instagram and seen what else she's read. I did also read her adult fantasy book, which was really good. It was shorter. It's called When Among Crows, so I do highly recommend that. That's an aside. But The Fates Divide was okay. I do think that I would have had maybe higher rating if I had read it on like a physical book, because I read Carve the Mark in a physical book, and I gave Carve the Mark 5 stars when I read it. But this one I only ended up giving 3.5 stars because I felt like it was, a lot of people said that it was a good thing that it was very heavy on the action and it was less on like the relationship building. But for me, I didn't really like that part. I liked the relationship, and I thought it would be more of a romance, I want to say, like a YA like love story, but it wasn't really at all, where the first one was sort of more like that. This one really had no, like, they were together maybe at the beginning and at the end they got together, but you know, in between they were really just like fighting separately and then getting into fights with each other. So it was sort of like that. But yeah, I do highly recommend Carve the Mark as well, like the first book. So if you like the first book, then maybe you can come and give The Fates Divide a try as well. So yeah, 3.5 stars. Next, another audiobook, which is Cultish by Amanda Montell, and this does have a subtitle as well. I believe it's Cultish the Language of Fanaticism. I don't really know how to pronounce it. This is a nonfiction book evolving around language and how language relates to cults and like cult activity. I thought it was interesting. I think I would have liked it to go more in depth in a way, if I can say that. It felt like she said a lot of, this will be covered in chapter 4. Like when she would like mention something and then it would be like, this is going to be covered in chapter 4. And I felt like it did that more than it would actually talk about stuff. And then when it got to what she was talking about in chapter 4, for example, it would be saying just like, oh, so this is going to be covered in chapter 6. Like, I just felt like it did that too much. I've never really had a book do that, where it would like talk about what's going to come next in the book. I feel like the book, even if it's nonfiction, should just like naturally flow, and you shouldn't have to like say what's coming next in the book. I don't know, I'm not an author, but that's just how I felt. It was really interesting to learn about, and it went into like some well-known like big cults as well, but then also smaller ones such as like stuff that you wouldn't think of, like Tupperware, like when women would have like Tupperware parties, or like certain yoga and athletic brands and stuff, how their language creates like a cult following. So yeah, it was quite interesting, but I didn't take so much from it, so I ended up giving it a 3 stars, and 3 stars is still pretty good, right? That means just I enjoyed it. It didn't really leave anything with me. So next we have another Marie Lu book. This one is The Young Elites. This one I ended up giving 3.5 stars, so it looks like I liked it a little bit less than Warcross, which yeah, makes sense. This one follows a world where children got sick with a disease, and then they would be left with a physical marking, and they would also sometimes have powers, and the people who don't have physical markings would really be killing and stuff, like the kids who do have physical markings. But then this group rises up called the Young Elites, which are kids with physical markings that have powers and want to rise up and fight for themselves. I thought this was, yeah, 3.5 stars. I like Marie Lu's writing. It was okay, but not a good favorite, and I don't think it's something that I'll be thinking about for long to come. But yeah, if you want to give that a try, yeah. Okay, now we're on to my last book of the month, which I do have as a physical. So it's James Dashner, The Eye of Mines. James Dashner is most known, that has a really big glare, so I'm just gonna put it down. Is most known for being the author of the Maze Runner series, which I did read as well, and I did like it. A lot of people don't like it so much, but I did like it. And now The Eye of Mines, I physically read this book last summer, probably in June or July, and I really liked it. The ending was actually such a big twist that I didn't see coming at all for a James Dashner book where it's like, you know, YA, like usually don't have such big twists in YA. I thought it was really, really good. And so I decided this month to listen to it on audiobook. The audiobook didn't really hit the same for me. Maybe it's just because I saw the ending coming, but I didn't, yeah, I don't know. I recommend reading this one as a physical just because I think the ending has more of an impact when you're reading it physically, at least for me personally, because I do think that there's a big difference between listening to audiobooks and then reading books physically. So I still ended up giving it 5 stars because I have the memories of when I read it the first time, so it's still like that for me. So yeah, Eye of Mines, 5 stars, James Dashner. Now I wanted to briefly talk about what I am reading currently. So listening on audiobook, I'm listening to The Rule of Thoughts, which I do have physically as well, but I'm listening to it, which is the second book in the Eye of Mines doctrine, or the Mortality Doctrine, I believe it's called. Yeah, the Mortality Doctrine is what the series is called. It's the sequel to the Eye of Mines. I think I'm just like, even just like maybe under an hour into that audiobook, but I am liking it and I will finish it, and we'll see how I feel about that one, and I might read the third one in the series as well. Now for my next one, which I do wish I finished in October, but it's not looking too hopeful. What the Hex by Jessica Clare. This is I don't read too much rom-com. It's just a silly romance following a woman familiar, which is like a apprentice to like witches and warlocks, and she has a pet squirrel named Pistachio, so that's fun. And it's called an enemies to lovers. It's not very enemies, it's more like I don't like you so much and you don't like me so much. I don't know if I would call that enemies, but it's like acquaintances to lovers maybe. Well, anyways, I'm only this much in, so maybe they become more enemies. I don't know. So he is a warlock and she goes to apprentice under him as his familiar, but it's not allowed because he did some bad things and he's not allowed to have a familiar, but she does it anyways because she really wants to be a familiar. So this is really good so far, and I really wish that I read more actually fall and Halloween-y books this season, but I just didn't find the time. But I am reading this and I'm actually really liking it. It's written really well and it's just silly, so I'm enjoying it and I'm having fun. Another Halloween-y book that I'm reading is What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. So I've heard a lot of good things about T. Kingfisher, but I've never actually read any of their books. So this one is about, I'm actually almost done, so I might finish that before Halloween. This is about a woman, I believe, but I think I'm not sure on the genders. It's, if you read it, you'll understand. Who goes to visit her old friend and her brother because her friend is really sick, and she finds out it's like fungusy. I believe it's a retelling of a Edgar Allan Poe book or story. It's like fungus, like, what is this fungus doing? Why is this gross place? The atmosphere is really good, really Halloweeny. It's not scary, it's more just unsettling. But yeah, I'm really enjoying that one as well. And the last book that I am currently reading is, Crescent Kingdom by Sarah J. Maas. And I've been harping about how I'm so busy, and I decided to read a book this thick. Yeah, I did. I'm currently 90 pages in, and the main reason why I decided to pick this up, now, I've never actually read any Sarah J. Maas before. I believe I listened to, like, this podcast about, not Throne of Glass, A Court of Thorn and Roses, but a podcast that I really like is doing a deep dive on Crescent City in sort of like a book club format, where they tell you a certain amount of pages to read every week, and then you read it, and then we'll discuss. So I thought, for such a mammoth book like this, that would be really interesting format. So it is called LPN Deep Dives Crescent City, if anyone's interested in that and following along. I really like the ladies, Natalie and Jackie, who do it. I think they have, like, it's really fun listening to them talk and stuff. So yeah, Crescent City, it's so far really good. I'm just 90 pages in, and something actually crazy happened. I was reading it in a cafe, and I was like, if any of you know Crescent City, you'll know. I don't want to say it just in case anyone hasn't read it yet, even though it's pretty popular. But I was reading it in a cafe, and I was like having like an actual reaction. I was like, oh my god. And I really do want to read more than the 90 pages right now, but I'm holding off so that I can listen to the podcast and so that I can keep up with it, keep up with them and how they're reading it as well. But yeah, I'm so far really, really liking it. So yeah, I can't wait to read more of that. This was my first ever reading wrap up for September and October, so I hope you really enjoyed. Please let me know if there's any other reading content you would want to see other than just, the monthly stuff. This was really fun for me to film, and I hope that anyone watching enjoys. And I'll also post different like vlogs and stuff if anyone's interested in that. So thank you so much. Bye.